Hi. So next, it's me. So I've been introduced by Larry and Emre several times about Dataverse. So one thing that Larry was mentioning in his talk is that, okay, we have a bunch of data, they're sitting there. Now what we do with this data? And so the attempt that we are doing at Dataverse, like in many other platforms, is to bring actually computing close to the data. So where the data lives. In an environment which is a data repository. So just to give you an idea, for those of you who don't know Dataverse yet, so Dataverse was born as a platform for the social scientists. The few social scientists in the beginning of the 20s that want to use data, actual data, to draw some conclusion, let's say, rather than just qualitative analysis. And so it was born for the social scientists, and now, as you see, the data which is contained in Dataverse essentially goes across all disciplines, including astrophysics. And the whole idea of this repository is, of course, provide a venue for the researchers to share their data in a way that is actually discoverable, and this is the famous FAIR principle that was mentioned before, but also in a way that you can cite those data, like you cite publications. So every time you publish some data on Dataverse, you get a DOI, for example, that your work for collecting the data and sharing the data can be actually properly mentioned. So there is a network of now Dataverse, because Dataverse is an open source project. We have 115 installations that self-declared their existence to the network. There are much more out there. Just a few numbers, just to show the diversity of Dataverse. So we have, this is a small data world yet in Dataverse, but still we have 70 terabytes of data from all different types of disciplines, millions of files. And the ability of Dataverse is to make all these things discoverable and searchable and usable by the others. Just only Dataverse, Harvard Dataverse has 70K users, which deposited data. And if you see this plot here, it's quite impressive also for us. Last year we got 52% growth in terms of number of new installation. And this is why. This is because, of course, it's an open source project, so the community grows in an endogenous way, but also because data sharing is becoming more and more important. And now we have AI, and AI is consuming lots of data. So this is the right place where you want to do some analysis. So about FAIR. So FAIR is the acronym for Findable, Interoperable, Accessible, and Reusable, meaning that there should be a standard to make this data discoverable. There should be a standard to describe the metadata from across fields, because you want to do search across fields. And maybe using semantic types or other approaches, you want also to link data across different, say, disciplines. So there are lots of standards that we support and lots of so-called persistent identifier. Of course, you know DOI, you may know also ORCID, and so forth. So all of these can be attached to any part of your data. And then you have to ensure preservation. You need to be sure that because of interoperability, you need to be sure that you can actually retrieve this data for doing actually something on this data. And then you want to track provenance, which is very important. And Memento, I think, part of it is about provenance, and also versioning, which you expect from any repository. Okay, so that's it. But the point is that once you have this, then anyone can build their own search engine, because you have very well-structured metadata. And so, for example, you go to Google datasets, and you can extract all information. You can do any type of query that you usually do on Google just for Dataverse or other repositories. You can feed a Perplexity AI with Dataverse. I mean, we did nothing. They just scan Dataverse because it's fully open. You can ask open NLP questions, let's say. Or you can have repositories like DNH, which is just a portal to discover data in biomedical sciences across, say, the research spectrum. And we contribute, of course, along with other repositories. The other important thing that we support is fair posting, because It's very easy to create a crawler, but then once you have information about the crawler, you need to reverse engineer the content of the web page that you actually downloaded. So signposting is a way to inform, so there is a standard for this, is a way to inform which links corresponds to which type of content. So this link is about data, this link is about provenance, this link is about the author, and whatever. So you don't need to do this reverse engineering. And this all, of course, helps search engines to do their job. So Dataverse is not just a data repository. I like to see Dataverse as a more, as a citizen in the research data cycle plus more, in the sense that we do build services around Dataverse from, for example, you have an idea, you want to design your study, we can help you because we have experience about 1 million data sets which have been collected, and we know what you need to do when you want to create a survey, you want to collect data, and so forth. Then you use this before you start any research to see, like you search for the literature, you can search for existing data about the topic you want to explore, and so forth. So I'm not going to all the steps of these slides, but you can see secure data storage, persistent storage, all projects that are going on at Dataverse. And then there is another thing I want to highlight, is that Dataverse was born as a research data platform, but actually can be used also for administrative data. So administration produces endogenously data, and you can put them in a data lake, but then if you want to look for some administrative data, you need to ask the person to see where is this data sitting. So Dataverse can be the place or the interface between the user, which needs to use the data, and the actual data lake, whichever data lake you want to build, once you construct the metadata. So far, Dataverse, like any other repository, was about small data. Now we reach the large data, community. In a sense, we recently implemented Globus to actually manage the access to the NESE disk, so NESE disk and NESE tape for the petabyte storage. And this was part of the formerly called Harvard Data Commons, which Emre just mentioned. And essentially, Dataverse is able to, you can focus on the left-hand side, sorry, the circle here. So it can manage the access to different type of storage, in different ways. So authentication, you can control different accessibility and manage users and so forth, all within Dataverse, which talk to different protocols, to the different storage types. So what I'm going to present now very quickly is that now we managed to reach the ability to compute directly on the data thanks to the MOC infrastructure. So putting together NESE and NERC, data now sits on, in this version of Dataverse, sits directly on NESE, can be NESE disk or NESE tape, and NERC can access NESE, say containers directly. And essentially, Dataverse is the interface to this data, which is stored on NESE tape or disk, and on which you can run computing without having the data flowing over the internet. So the idea is that you compute locally on your data without doing any data transfer across the internet. So this is how we configure this. We use OpenStack for the moment, or we plan to go to OpenShift. So there is a container for Dataverse. There is a Jupyter Hub containerized for running the computation. And whenever the user uploads data to Dataverse, they go either to disk or tape, according to the choice, of course. And when Dataverse sees data sitting on NESE disk, it activates the possibility to run computation on data. So we start with one real data, so we don't like just fake examples. So this is a real data set which is actually it's a big project at Harvard and NASA. And we prepared these two versions, the NESE version, sorry, the NESE tape version and the NESE disk version. So if you want to upload data into Dataverse and you want to go to either NESE disk or NESE tape, you can use the Globus. This is one of the options that you can do. So you can expect authentication. I mean, I want to skip all this part, but the idea is that you essentially start from your local, say, Globus directory space, and you move data into Dataverse the way you like. So you can organize in directories, you can assign different permissions to the files, and so forth. And then once the upload is started, Dataverse receives notification when the process is finished. Of course, for petabytes of data, it might take some time, and that's the reason why we use Globus API for this. But you can do an S3 to S3 connection if you want. So once the data are there, this little icon appears in Dataverse, and you know that these data are now on tape. If you want to access them, there is clicking there is a particular way to access tape data. So data sitting on tape. Or if you are on an NESE disk, say storage, and you have a Python notebook, for the moment only Python, but we will add R support, then immediately the assess dataset drop-down menu will show you the compute on data option. At that point, you click on this menu, and you're sent to a Python notebook. So some magic now appears. So of course there is a way that Dataverse informed the Python notebook where to take this data from. And they are taken from an NGHPCC, of course, endpoint. And also there is another important fact that this data exists on an S3 bucket somehow. In this case, it's tape. But you need to remap correctly on the fly. The file names which have been used by the notebook, by the author, which were running this notebook on his own computer. And now you want to run it on NESE disk through Dataverse. So this mapping happens completely automatically. And then you have the results. So you can do everything. So everything is seen as a local file. Files do not go across the network. I mean, of course, they are loaded just into the memory of the Jupyter notebook for this use. You can explore the data, and then eventually, if you need, you can download the data later on, and even the notebook. So this is how we implemented so far connectivity between the data and the compute in Dataverse. So because we talk about, part of the slides are not here. Anyway, so there are a few challenges which still remains in terms of how we make this model scalable more than it is now for this demo. So the first thing is that, of course, we need to ask, there are some technicalities that we need to solve. So for example, now when you spin the Jupyter container, it's just a container pre-configured. And of course, you want to allow the user to be able to choose CPU, GPU, RAM, VRAM, whatever it is needed for that particular workflow to be executed. We need to find, as Emma was saying, we need to find a way to charge user for the computing part, because apparently this is the hardest part at Harvard, asking for money to offer services. And Dataverse is an open repository. And so we need to establish this part. And this is probably where MOC can help, like an interface between the technological part, which is the infrastructure, the software part, which is us, and the researchers who want to run the analysis and need some kind of billing. And so this is where MOC probably can help us in defining both the cost model, and I agree that there should be a part which is for everyone and a part which is to be paid by who wants to use it, and also all the administrative part. And yeah, and the other thing is that the promise when you put data in Dataverse is the data remains there for a very long time, let's say, if not forever. So we need to, in the business model, we need to include also the sustainability, I mean the long-term sustainability of having the data sitting there. And this is an open problem now with big data. It was not for, say, up to two years ago, but now it's becoming a real problem for every repository. And that's it. So thank you very much. I also had some AI thing, but it didn't flow into the slides, so I don't know why.
Thanks for the talk. And it seems like a really pragmatic thing to do to make it so easy to get at the data. I just had a very minor question about it. What if you were trying to research 2 data sets at the same time? Is it easy to sort of spin up an environment that contains both for you to sort of join them together?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good idea and a good point. So in this demo, we didn't do this, but in practice, yes, it is possible. It is even possible, I think, in the future to, I mean, the way we built this interaction is totally agnostic to the computing part of it. So you can actually spin the container somewhere else. And in that case, you have to move the data. So yes, this kind of possibility is still available.
So you had the word provenance in there, and I think I know some of the stuff you may be talking about in the future, but is there a notion today, and how do you capture that provenance today if you do?
The provenance, I mean, when you create, this is specific to Dataverse. So when you create a data in Dataverse, you have to specify the provenance. So there is no way you can publish data until you fill up a certain number of metadata fields. And one of these is the provenance. Then you have licensing, you have all this stuff.
I see, so it's what a user specifies. There's no automatic collection of provenance. I mean, so if you do what you're talking about here with having compute that can then, say, mutate and create new data sets, do you view that as something you could automatically capture?
It is possible. It is possible. I mean, technically it is possible the way Dataverse is built. Now, when you publish the data, you are the owner of the data, and you have to decide whether you want this to happen to your data or not. And what happens in Dataverse, every time you you change one number into a data set, you have a new version, and this is done automatically. So all the metadata are automatically updated whenever you touch anything in your data set. So there is a collection in Dataverse which actually update the data, I think, every month. So they use the same collection. Some external process update the data, and so this information is automatically captured by Dataverse. So the new version of the data is kept. Yeah.
So maybe I missed it, but how do you deal with data that not comes once a month, but comes once an hour or once a day, right? Is that a new data set? It's the same data set? I mean,
it's up to you to decide whether a new release is a new data set or it's a new release of the same data set.
But you're appending, right?
Sorry?
You're appending all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So every append could be a different data set, but if it's the same data set, is a different version. How do you deal with appends?
So, for example, the GeoScam group is doing something like this, but on a yearly basis. So they update petabytes of data, and they essentially recalculate all the benchmark data every year. It's the same data, but it's updated with new information. So it's retuned, let's say. And in that case, they want to release as new data. So it's a new data set. In some other cases, you can just update the version.
I guess one more question, so you said there's hundreds of Dataverse instances around the world, and they're sharing information about which data sets they all collect. So if I'm sitting on the MOC and I want to access a data set, it'll identify, say, that data set exists in a Dataverse in Ireland or something.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a natural mapping to say that if I discover it that way, and other people are computing on that same data set, say in the NERC environment, I should be able to identify, instead of fetching it again, I should be able to get a cached version, for example, in an environment. Is that consistent with your?
This is up to each installation to activate a cache or not. It is possible. So when you search within Dataverse, you can get information, metadata information about some data set which is in Ireland, for example. Then if you want to access the data, you have to download the data. And of course, if another user do the same thing, you have to re-download the data. But unless the installation in Ireland create some kind of caching system, which is possible to activate. In this case, you don't.
Well, I'm more thinking that the...
I think I understand what you say, but it's not yet what you expect it to be.
Yeah, I mean, if we can identify the name of the object being something, it's hash or something, we can incorporate, like the community cache you'll hear about later on.
Yeah.
Feels like we could sort of look it up to see if we already have that thing.
I mean, you can, because every file in every single file is hashed. So you have this information. This is stored, and you can retrieve this information. You can check whether you already got this data or not. Exists in your data lake, whatever. Yeah, this is possible. Yeah.